Oh boy, episode 10, here we go. Hey everyone, David R.B. here, director of Songs of War. Here we are, at the end of Season 1, 10 episodes in, over 2 hours of Songs of War. Everything has been leading to all these moments for each of the story arcs. We've got so much to cover in this episode 10 behind the scenes video, but I think a lot of it is going to be really exciting, so let's get started. We saved my personal favorite Songs of War location as a surprise until the very end of the season, Ataraxia. This is the only Ardoni city outside of normal Ardoni territories, hidden away in the mountains and difficult to access. We wanted to show this place was much more diverse, with Ardoni from all clans, as well as even humans and other species mixed in. I don't think it's ever explicitly mentioned in the series, but the story behind Ataraxia was that it was founded during the time of the Great War, as a safe haven for those suffering in the war. Gallius was one of the original founders, but his brother Thalius was against the idea and wanted all the Ardoni to fight instead. Building it was a lot of fun. We started by just making these big blobs in the general areas we wanted for the islands, then spent a long time detailing them, adding stalactites. I've always liked the default acacia trees in Minecraft. The lighter wood complements stone materials nicely, and the flat canopies create nice shade, while allowing you to kind of walk under them, and you can even place them next to walkways and angle them in such a way that they kind of frame and cover your walkways. I bet you didn't expect me to be nerding out over Minecraft trees, but dang do these trees work, both artistically and functionally. We also did some custom birch trees to get some lighter wood mixed in, to really help the place feel clean. We put this shrine on the highest point in the city, which I think makes sense symbolically to the Ardoni. It's also cool because from almost anywhere in the city you can look up and see the shrine. When writing the music for it, we wanted to make sure that although this place was primarily an Ardoni city, we could differentiate it from the rest of the Ardoni vibe. The main Ardoni musical element is choir, which is almost entirely lacking here. After Infinity also mentioned wanting to introduce a new instrument that we haven't heard before in the series, as if you were coming across it just like you would find this hidden city, so we used a shakuhachi. When Dan writes the music for Songs of War, oftentimes the scenes aren't rendered or lit, sometimes they're still in layout and the characters just slide around. He said he wanted to get the visual look of Ataraxia to inspire the music, so he added some screenshots poorly tracked over the layout to get the vibe. Lighting it was, I think, some of my best work. It came near the end of the series when I'd already kind of mastered a lot of stuff. The main breakthrough was the creation of a super dynamic mist sphere. I may go more into technical details about things like mist spheres in a tutorial later, but I used mist spheres to control the mist in our scenes. I then created dynamic mist spheres to get some nice color variants. Here in Ataraxia, I had like 3 different gradients, all creating an amazing variety of colors, both above and below, as well as in the direction towards and away from the sun. I also wanted to really nail that initial reveal shot, so I added some beautiful light rays, which I rarely add. And these aren't like the 2D plain light rays, these are the composited light rays. Okay, time to move on from Ataraxia. Psych, I got a lot more to say about it. So floating mountains have always been a thing that heavily inspire me in fantasy and sci-fi. It was the main location that we were hiding from all the promotional material. We tried our best not to show it in any of the build live streams, hid it from the 2D map we shared, and never talked about having a city in the floating mountains. And there's this cool Halo 3 mission I liked a lot called Ataraxia, and ever since then we have a lot of our Minecraft cities were called Ataraxia, which were always built up in the air. Initially, before we started building it, the idea was going to be that the city was way high up, like above the clouds. I decided against this because I wasn't sure if I would be able to render cloud stuff, and I thought it would be nice seeing the surrounding mountains as background pieces. As you get closer to the heart of Ardonia, the land starts becoming more unstable and fantasy. Yes, that's right, the land becomes more fantasy. The mountains get taller and some things begin to float. We did work a bit of science behind it though. You'll notice that the floating islands all seem to have redstone ores and even redstone blocks in the islands. I don't want to fully explain the science behind it and ruin the magic, but I like that there might at least be Sorry if you hear that truck driving by again. I bet it's the same truck as last time there's the truck driving around. He's back for more. He's like, okay, anyway. I don't want to fully explain the science behind it and ruin the magic, but I liked that there might at least be some kind of reason to why it happens here and it isn't just completely contrived. When brought into Blender, I separated each island and gave them just a bit of smooth, random movement, mostly up and down, so when you hold still, you can see these mountains behind the characters just swaying in the wind ever so peacefully. What was more difficult was the vines connecting the islands. I wanted those islands to move too, and I wasn't going to let no leafy vine boy stop me from my vision, so I had to create these, just like a super basic rig, complete with weight painting on every single vine to get the islands connected and have the vines move with it. Also, while working on the Ataraxia scene file, I updated all our water shaders for the first time since survival games, as well as added some new water elements. I thought the water looked kinda poo-poo from above, which is where we mostly see it from. I redid the material to allow light to pass through it better, and increase the complexity of the noise for more detail. I also added these tube elements around the waterfalls, which look kinda like water spray falling beside them, and finally added some water splashes near the base of the waterfalls to really complete the look. In the last behind the scenes, I mentioned that the Guardian scene wasn't initially existing, and the reason was I was trying to get rid of Timber. This was because I had no idea how Timber was going to manage being up in Ataraxia. Eventually, however, we did a huge overhaul on the cliffside near Ataraxia, and we extended the town into these little outskirts areas on the cliff, and added a small stable in the area off the islands. Some nice animation detail of Melon Boy dropping melons. Most town crowds are done with loops, but we always try to add at least some new actions in the foreground to keep the world feeling more alive. Hubris Nestoris, your turn. I think this character is cool, because he's one of the rare Ardoni wanting to stand up against everything going on. Unlike Zulius though, he thinks the situation is a lot bigger than just a single battle at Mount Velgrin. He kinda sees the big picture like Thalius, except he's a lot more forward, taking action, recruiting directly. And guess who's back? Carl's back, introducing Gallius Sandaris. The similar voice is absolutely intentional. This is just the way Ardoni siblings are. We've improved this last episode with Galadar and Hadeon, who are also brothers. Gallius has the same markings as Thalius, but he's a bit of a different shade of blue. Personality-wise, though, he's very different than Thalius, and we wanted to make sure that this isn't a case of just, oh no, Thalius died mid-season, and oh, surprise, here's Thalius 2.0 to take his place. There are many things that make Gallius unique from his brother. He may have been building a secret supply of weapons, and will train Sen to use those weapons, but he won't be using them himself. I'm just glad Carl's back because, more Carl bloopers. It was funny seeing all the people like, oh no, Carl, he's a shame that he's dead and Thalius is dead. Is he going to voice anyone else? And I had to really hold my tongue and be like, I don't know, he's dead. Here comes the truck again. Are you kidding me? Welcome to Texas. Before recording lines for Gallius, Carl and I talked about how we could make his voice distinct from Thalius. We tried some different variations on accents, speech, and after a while I said, just do your normal voice. Completely normal, no fantasy, epic, no exaggeration, just talk like you normally would. And immediately this seemed to work. And if you listen, you can really hear the way Gallius says things is just a bit more straightforward.
He may seem difficult, but he is good at what he does. He may seem difficult, but he's good at what he does.
This also fit with his character, I think, who hasn't really been out on these big adventures and seen epic, grand things. There was this nice little detail in the script that dates way far back into the earliest days of when I was first conceiving this universe and story, before it was even adapted to Minecraft, and that was the idea that the character, who is now Gallius, would be kind of working in his workshop when he learns of the news of his brother's death, and he tries to act a bit calm about it, seeming almost angry about and critical of his brother. He doesn't want to show that he cared due to the dynamic of his relationship with Thalius. However, inside, he is feeling some sadness, and that causes him to be a bit shakier and miss the swing, hurting himself a bit. So even though he tried to hide it on the outside, we can see it affecting him anyway. When he throws his tools down and walks off, I thought it would be nice to see the hammer kind of linger for a second together with the pickaxe, then fall to the floor, symbolizing how he just lost his brother. After Gallius talks with Ninja Sen, they go downstairs to where it is more comfortable, which has become a joke because there's nothing at all more comfortable down there. There aren't any chairs or anything, just a stone floor and a lava forge. It was one of those things that was written in the script, but didn't quite make it in the build. Now it's just funny. Back to the purple arc, one thing you may have noticed about the egg was the energy on it, which has been gradually getting brighter during the season as it's been getting closer to hatching. Every single episode I would just increase the brightness a little bit so you wouldn't quite notice it unless you kind of went way back and compared two different scenes. The hatching effect was designed to be very explosive, just seemed right for the Ender stuff, which is always so full of energy. It also helped me avoid having some really detailed cracking animation, which would have been a lot more awkward. And we now meet Luna. Initially, Abigail did say the dragon's name, Luna, when she saw her standing on the rock in front of the moon. We even had this line voiced, but it felt a bit weird to be immediately naming the dragon, so you'll just have to learn her name here in the behind the scenes for now. In the episode 1 behind the scenes, I mentioned how some of the best stuff for the Ender Dragon rig hadn't been shown, and this is what I was referring to. The Songs of War Ender Dragon rig was designed by Zophie Cat, and I told her that I wanted to make sure each Ender Dragon could be a bit unique, and that we could tell Ender Dragons apart in the series. For Luna, I wanted to make sure that she had some different placement of horns and ear things. We designed something that allowed her to be much more expressive. Afterwards, Zophie then rigged a tiny baby version of Luna, which was just absolutely adorable, and we see here at the end of the season. One criticism I imagine people will have with this scene in general is how it seems Abigail just kind of quickly moved on from having just lost her wolf. I personally was not super happy with this either. It's just sort of the way the story worked out in this season. The climax happened near the end of the season, as they often do, and we wanted to have the egg hatch before the end. They just naturally occurred near each other. I did make sure, though, when animating Abigail's face here, she doesn't look happy that much. She kind of smiles a bit, but she has that sad look at the end, because she still knows, what just happened. The final battle between Feldon and the Necromancers was hopefully a surprise for some people. We were kind of building up to this big final battle between the Feldon army and the Necromancers. They're going to take them out before they can spread. But the troops arrive and realize they were too late. The kingdom ignored the problem for too long. The Necromancers grew in strength and were able to strike first. I don't think people will be too disappointed, though, that they missed out on a fight, considering what they're about to get later this episode. And it means that rather than a single battle here, now we're going to get an all-out war in Season 2. Besides, Nika would have been sitting out since she wasn't in the military, but now everyone in Feldon will be working together as it affects everyone. You may have noticed that the final shot of this storyline was on Kyoshi, though not Lucan or Nika. He's the one who's responsible for protecting this kingdom, and he just lost an entire city to the Necromancers due to a bad move. He's going to be feeling the weight of this war, and we're going to see a lot more of that in the future. And the battle at Mount Velgrin. Here comes the real battle. The scene opens with a close-up of Thalius' sword. This is the first time we've seen it since Thalius' death in episode 6. I was hoping that for a split moment you'd recognize it and think of Thalius, but then Tigran steps in the frame and reminds you that it's his now. I just gotta make Thalius' death sting once more, in case you've gotten over it by now. When I wrote the script, there was a standoff between the good Ardoni and the Voltaris, and then Zulius basically said his line, and everyone charged into battle and smashed each other with swords and staves. When it came time to direct the scene, I had the same thoughts as when I was doing the Ardoni burial. It felt too human. These are Ardoni, they're song wielders. Their battles would begin by a battle of songs. If one side was stronger, they'd win without even the need to resort to kind of normal combat. So I had to devise a way for a nice back and forth that showed them evenly matched. First, the good Ardoni fire off a lot of Agressium songs, but the Voltaris have a Protisium wielder who creates the big shield wall blocking it. Then Tigran retaliates with an attack of his own. Rather than using another defensive song, I showed the Ardoni use one of the Soporium songs, Telekinesis, to literally grab and hold Tigran's song. This was a great demonstration of the interplay between the different songs and how they can counteract each other, and really makes the battle seem different than your traditional battle scenes. This huge fight was animated by Skyfall. We had to be smart about this because no way would have been even possible to constantly be animating everyone fighting all the time. So the only real shot where everyone is animated fighting is the initial clash where everyone comes together. As soon as the first camera cuts, we began just animating a single fight happening per shot. Everyone in the background was just frozen. We then looked at everyone who clashed at this starting point and designed a fight loop of those two characters fighting. Every time they fight doesn't focus on those two characters, it's just the same loop of them fighting over and over. I usually give the fight animators a lot of freedom with just some general guide on overall timing and pacing. The bit where Tigran teleports to the upper layer using Thalias' teleport song was initially just a real basic overview. I told Skyfall to do whatever. He came up with this cool idea to have a song knock an Ardoni body off the edge, and the camera follows it for a bit, revealing the big fight still going on underneath. It really helped remind you of the scale of the battle, even during the individual fights. The visual effects for this scene was just a huge undertaking. We were pushing our VFX budget to the absolute max here. Normally when I have my list of tasks to complete a scene, the VFX section is either empty or contains like 1 to 5 different effects, usually just something like, some particles or maybe some smoke. Here it was like a page and a half. Luckily VFX is one of my favorite departments of the pipeline, but even still, just the amount of things that had to be completely designed, tested, and implemented was a massive undertaking. Luckily by now I was pretty proficient with Blender VFX and already had a bit to pull from for most of them. So we got introduced to 4 new songs in this battle. The first was the Voltaris' Shield Wall. As with all new songs, I try to keep them balanced so it doesn't become superior to any of the other songs in its order. The only Protesium song we've seen in Season 1 was the shield created by the Death Singer in the opening shot. That one behaves as a nice, full bubble shield, shielding the user, but only the user. Here, the wall is much bigger and can protect the whole team, but only from one direction. They're vulnerable from behind. Visually, it follows a lot of the standard fractally look established from the Protesium song object itself, but I went with a bit more of a triangular look for most of the actual shards. One of the ranged Ardoni on the cliff uses this kind of electric sniper sort of song. This was a surprisingly easy effect to produce once I got the material down. It was mainly just taking some elements from the Aggressium song and applying it to a 2D plane. What really sold the trick and made it feel more 3D was adding displacement to the plane. In scene, it kind of looked like the character was throwing towels at people and smothering them. When I was doing the prologue, I used this song again to save time, having to invent a whole new song. Then we get one of the Aggressium songs I think is one of the most unique, is the Spiker. We had this staff design which looked a lot less pointy than the others, and I thought it might be interesting to vary things up, and instead of having it sort of form the song like the others in front of where the character was aiming, that it'd be more like a summoning thing, and it summons this thing which sort of fires the spikes out of that summoning point. Also, instead of sticking to purely energy-based elements, I like the idea of seeing something a bit more physical. The spikes are still made out of energy, but they have impact and weight. They even shatter into more energy when colliding with obsidian, or just break after a bit of time. Finally, we had the Telekinesis song. I didn't want it to just be like the Force or the Gravity Gun. I wanted to give it a very clear, visible energy so we could tell something was being manipulated, add sounds, etc. I went for this kind of bubbly look from the inside of the Saporium song, and made the bubbles sort of capture the target and hold it frozen in space. However, Tigran's energy ball still has a lot of energy, and you can see it kind of fighting and trying to escape, so I shook it around a little to give it that unstable look. I had to create charge effects for Protesium and Saporium, which I hadn't done up to this point. The Protesium charge is actually very similar to the Protesium bubble shield effect, only it's a temporary flash. The Saporium charge was designed using the same telekinesis elements with just some tweaks. The Lightning Storm. It's super. In episode 3, I manually set up a single lightning strike, hand keyframed a bunch of clouds to flash, and got a pretty cool lightning. However, we need to think bigger. That's way too time intensive. How about a procedurally generated system of lightning strikes that occur naturally around the entire world at all times? Yeah, so that's what I did. There it is. A never-ending, reusable lightning storm made entirely out of 2D planes. The portal. Yep, there it is. The portal was a lot of fun. It was a very different approach than my usual stuff. I honestly wish I could have spent a lot more time on it, but it was already taking a while, and many of the things I wanted to do aren't really suited for Blender. The real tricky bit was showing the other side of the portal in the same shots. We rendered 2 completely different scenes and then combined them together in editing. Another thing we did was, when the portal's open, you can see through it, from the future side looking into the past, but from the past, you can't see through it looking into the future. I thought this made sense because light can't travel back in time, and you can't see the future like that. but the main reason was because I didn't want to keep rendering the double scenes thing constantly during the Deathsinger fight. The truck's back again. Is that a third time the truck's here? Honk. I bet you were expecting something to come out of it like a normal portal, but this ain't no nether portal like some of you on the Theories channel were suspecting in our Discord. Rather than just passing through the portal itself collapses open and creates an actual hole between these two dimensions, and what you see is the same location, but in a different time. And here, during the Great War, we finally see the mysterious duel between the Deathsinger and the Tidesinger. This was the big reveal of Season 1, the best kept secret, even bigger than Thalios' death. This is what the Ardoni This is what the Ardoni story arc has all been leading to. This is why the Voltaris had been gathering around the portal frame, awaiting for it to open, because they knew the Deathsinger was going to be coming out. This is why Tigran mentions having prepared for the moment for so many years. It was a plan that began during the Great War. This is why Tigran and the Voltaris suddenly struck the Ardoni clans and tried to steal the Prime songs, and it's why they were working with Jalkar to make sure the Ender Egg wouldn't be hatched. And all this was the grand plan of Ingressus Voltaris, the Deathsinger. This is why the opening line of the series is about the Deathsinger, and the entire prologue focuses on his story. The Deathsinger is the real villain of Songs of War, or Deathy Boy, as we sometimes call him. Other times we call him Burger Singer, when he's hungry for some burgers. We only get a single scene with him, but hopefully you can still learn a lot about him. The first thing you'll notice is probably his voice. Even though he is this big main villain, he doesn't have some super deep, generic, gravelly villain voice. He's quite young, and has a lot of emotion and tragedy behind his words. He's a very different villain than someone like Tigran. His fire sword, you didn't think I'd designed such an awesome sword with crazy fire effects, only for it to show up briefly in the prologue, did you? The sword texture itself was actually designed by Viper, the same builder who created Etheria. He was like, yeah, sure, I'll give making weapon design a shot, and ended up creating, one of my favorite weapon designs, which we immediately knew would be perfect for the Deathsinger. His flame effects are the first time we've ever done fully flame-simulated weapons in any of our animations. Previously, we've always tried to avoid this due to the long render times, long bake times, a lot of other little glitches that show up. But for a character this important, I knew it would be worth it. I created a lot of custom sound effects for his sword movements and hit sounds to really make his sword feel more epic and intense. We also meet the Tidesinger. Just like the Deathsinger, we're surprised to see that he's just as young, and his voice is even softer and more innocent sounding. It was super important to me that these two characters were both a contrast to the expectation of them being these grand, mythical legends. They're just normal people who happened to get swept up in the Great War together and happened to be, good song wielders and good fighters. They have emotions and ambitions just like every other character in the series. It was the tales of their deeds that gave us this illusion of them being something more. Tidesinger's staff, we always wanted to keep his weapon as something other than a sword, to make him seem just a little bit less aggressive and not really like the fighter that Deathsinger might be. His first staff design looked really cool in concepts, and it was planned to be his staff for a long time. However, when we were getting real close to animating his stuff, I started thinking about him fighting with that staff, and I realized it was just not going to look good in a fight. We gave this staff to some of the ceremonial Ardoni and the burials and the tournaments. I decided to give Tidesinger a new weapon design, a two-sided blade staff thing, which he could use in combat much better, but still, it doesn't seem quite as aggressive as a sword. It even has a cool little kind of folding slide-in, slide-out mechanics, that way you can put it on his back. In episode 1, I made his enchantment streak thing by creating these big curves manually, which appear to follow his staff motions, and then I'd animate a texture across the tube. I realized after doing this that this would be way too awkward to set up for this huge fight, so I needed something automatic. I ended up creating something working using 5 different points, which all follow the blade. Each are delayed by 1 extra frame. Okay, so that's enough visual effects for one episode. Oh, no, okay, wait, here comes a lot more songs. First up, the shotgun song. This was a super awesome looking one, which I wanted to spend a fair amount of time on, being that it's the Deathsinger's Aggressium. He doesn't have the Aggressium Prime, so he only has 1 Aggressium, and he'd be using it in combat. I designed it around the scatter shot from Jak and Daxter. I thought it'd be a lot more practical in combat for the Death Singer to use something that was just a close and immediate effect during combat. I said combat twice. This is also both Dan and I's favorite sound effect from the series. Take a moment just to appreciate how awesome this thing sounds. Next up is the kind of clone song thing. The effect here was similar to Blake's Semblance in RWBY, where the Death Singer leaves a copy of himself behind, which takes a hit instead of himself. It was also a great opportunity to do another slow motion glass effect, because why not? Then there's a small arm shield, which the Death Singer does, which is quite small, but highly maneuverable. Hang on, wait, that's 2 blue songs Death Singer just used. We'll come back to that later. The effect itself was actually just a shield wall. It was the shield wall effect, just scaled down, and I did some turbulence to kind of break apart the fractals when he moved his arm. Now we see Tidesinger's Mobilium song, Jumpy Boy song. Jumpy Boy song was something Zillion and I talked a while on, because it needed to really help give the Tidesinger an edge going up against the Death Singer, who often has prime songs. The good thing about Jumpy Boy song is it can be used in many different ways. Here he uses it to get this quick repeated attack going. He can place these little platforms on walls, upside down in the air, wherever he wants nearby, and then jump between them. He could even place just a single and use it as a platform. Death Singer counteracts this with a super jump song, which was actually pretty much just the Jumpy Boy song effect, because I got kind of lazy, and you couldn't really see it. The effect here was kind of off the bottom of the camera, but oh well. Tidesinger's beam song we saw briefly in the prologue, and see again here. I forget why we went with a beam for Tidesinger, but it looks visually cool when the Death Singer reflects it back using his sword, again showing songs aren't all powerful. I imagine the sword being diamond and enchanted helped a ton though. I think the next song is Biotic Charge. I don't really know though, I'm writing this script without checking the episode. This one was based off my favorite biotic ability from Mass Effect, and reading this makes me realize just how many of these effects were inspired off other things. Jumpy Boy wasn't. Jumpy Boy's a good boy. Who's a good boy? Jumpy Boy's a good boy. The Ground Raise is next, the second Seporium song we've seen. It's similar to telekinesis in that it involves manipulation of space, raising the ground up quickly, which can be used as an attack, or even to create some raised terrain as like a staircase or something. It's kind of like earth bending almost. Armor Lock is insane. I love it. The Armor Lock ability thing he does here is like his entire skin becomes one big protected thing, so he's completely invulnerable for a moment, however he can't move. It also has the added effect where if you try to hit him in this ability, it only takes 1 hit before it breaks, but the break creates like a little bit of a stun effect. And this is where you can start seeing that some of these songs, they almost have 2 different purposes. The Biotic Charge one, it is like a movement based one, but it also uses it to hit people and push them back and gives them a little shockwave. It's like a little knockback. And then the Armor Lock is a protective one, but it also can stun people and give them a little stun and like a little bit of an attack if you're hit while you're in your stun. People have been wondering about the Seporium songs since day 1, and I'll say now that they're probably a lot more underwhelming than the theories have been. We called them Seporium based off the root word support, but in reality, we use Seporium as the everything that isn't attack, defense, or mobility category. It's just a lot of random other things, often manipulation. We joke that it's the Miscellaneum song or the Uselessium song. Hey kids, I got you songs. Oh no, Thalius, not Seporium. Speaking of songs, now I think it's time I can finally reveal some more information about how songs work and what makes the Prime songs special. So, you've noticed that there are 4 orders of songs, each with a different role, the red attack, blue defend, etc. The way wielding songs work is each Ardoni can only wield 1 song of each order. So you only get 1 attacking song, 1 defense song. This means that an Ardoni can wield a total of 4 songs, 1 of each order, which you'll notice is the amount of pillars on the Ardoni shrines. This forces an Ardoni to choose their songs carefully and strategically. They can have a shield wall song that protects a group but doesn't protect their back, or they can have a bubble shield song that protects them from all sides but can protect a group. This means that the different songs are sought out after the Ardoni, and they tend to collect songs which work well for their needs. So what about Prime songs? How are they more powerful? Prime songs have the ability to use every song within that order. If you have the Protesium Prime song, you can do Shield Wall, you can do Bubble Shield, you can do Arm Shield, you can do Clone Break, you can do Armor Lock. This is why Prime songs are so strong. It's not about the songs themselves being any stronger or more powerful, but it's about the flexibility in having many different options at your disposal. You're not limited to just the one song you have. We thought this was a fair balance to avoid them being super overpowered. Someone who is better at wielding songs can still make a bigger, better shield wall than a weaker Ardoni using the Prime song to do the same thing. Also, now that you know how Prime songs work, I think it'll make sense why the effect inside them is an infinite array. You have one Prime song, but looking inside you can see every other song within that order all contained inside. Okay, so that finally clears that up. I've been keeping songs and Prime songs a secret, so you can learn them alongside Sen. What I haven't told you is how they harness that power, train for them, and wield them. That is something I will save until Season 2, since that is what Sen will be learning soon. Speaking of songs, before entering the portal, we see the Death Singer's songs all get torn from him. The idea was that songs can't be taken through time, and were stripped away. The Death Singer was counting on this in order to fake his death. This was one plot point we were honestly never fully happy with, but I could go on a really long story for how we got to this point in another video sometime. I think the idea worked in the end though, because having the songs left behind really did make viewers content that they were both dead, not returning. People weren't wondering, oh, I wonder if Death Singer's going to return. Instead, they were wondering, oh, I bet Tigran's going to become the new Death Singer kind of thing. So then the Death Singer steps through the portal and into the present time. For him, not a moment has passed since the events of the prologue. Surrounded and outnumbered, will the Death Singer be able to win the battle at Mount Velgrin for the Voltaris? Find out next season. Ooh-hoo-hoo-hoo. Now that we've come to the end of Season 1, I think you can see the main goal of this season. All the characters are now in their real starting positions. Everyone's set off, the exposition is mostly over. That huge, awesome, great war stuff you saw in the prologue, that is all coming back now in Season 2, just as Thalius warned it would. Sen will now be trained by Gallius to wield songs and to fight against the Voltaris. Abigail has her dragon, and will now be creating a new generation of Ender Knights. And Feldon is no longer just investigating some necromancer threat, but is now in a war against them. And thus concludes Songs of War, Season 1. On behalf of everyone at Black Plasma Studios, we hope you enjoyed Season 1. It was a massive undertaking to get this project made. As you can see by the full credits, there were so many people who put so many hours to make it happen. Big thanks to everyone involved, as well as all those who watched the series to the end. Those who engaged on our Discord, which you should absolutely join, link in description. I had a lot of fun reading your discussion, theories, and memes. I'd keep an eye on our community channel for a lot of upcoming bonus content. I'll be releasing a bunch of just random behind-the-scenes stuff, and maybe some tutorials on that channel. The question everyone's going to be asking now is, when do we get Season 2? Unfortunately, there's no actual guarantee we will get Season 2. We just have to judge how well this first season does in order to determine if we can afford doing another. If you want to help support Songs of War, you can either pledge to our Patreon, or get yourself some Songs of War merchandise. Honestly, if every person watching this video, listening to me talking right now, became a Cult patron, which is only $1 a month, or $12 in a whole year, it would absolutely help support this first season, and may even allow us to do the remaining 2 seasons. And this is where I say goodbye for now. Hopefully, I'll see you all again in Songs of War Season 2. That was a long recording. 43 minutes and 13 seconds?